chime in with some questions at the end, but we will see. So yeah, I'm also pulling up the list and recording. Cool.
All right.
Let me share this link. Okay. Man, I have so much respect for people who like live stream as a job.
Oh
There's just
yeah.
there's so many technical things that can go wrong at any given time. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. It's stressful.
But I feel like
It's
we've all learned a lot in the last year about how to do it better and how to do it,
mm-hmm.
which is great for like theater and projects like that. So, okay. I've got this pulled up here. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Come on. Okay. I'm set if you are set.
Hell yeah.
Cool. All right. And welcome to the now long hiatus podcast that has been completely on hold because of COVID, but is back for a special anniversary episode of Story Matters. Welcome, Joey Richter.
We're not gonna forget it. We're not
Yeah.
gonna forget it this year.
We definitely took a pause on the podcast in April of last year, for the 2 weeks that we were going to be inside. And that was over a year ago. And we just put it aside on the back burner. But I thought we can't not talk about Oscars this year. And I think this year, yeah, go ahead.
Have you had it paused since April?
Yeah, we just, we all just got so busy and going into kind of survival mode. And then I think right around September when we kind of started to not acclimate, but go, okay, this is life for a while. It just was one of those things that it was like, you know what, we'll come back to this. And I've been thinking in the last like month or two, I've been like, ooh, I'm itching to talk about things again. So hopefully we'll kind of bring it back consistently soon. But it was just one of those things that fell to the side for the year. But I'm really excited to talk about movies with you. I think this is such a weird, interesting year.
Oh yeah.
And I know you and I, for context, you and I both, I feel like more than most people, like going to the movies is kind of like it's like my sanctuary, right? Like I know you would go to the movies like what, 2 or 3 times a week, right?
Oh, definitely. Once I got, started with Movie Pass and then shifted over to AMC A-List, it was like
I had Cinemia in there somewhere, and that was a hot mess. But
oh yeah, did that apply to the ArcLight?
It applied to ArcLight, and the last thing I did was saw Avengers Endgame with it, and then then it all crashed and burned, all of it.
Yeah,
AMC
I mean,
A-List.
definitely except AMC A-List, and that's might actually also be the only one when we get back as well. But I've missed that a lot too. This year has been in general, obviously, a weird year, but a weird year for movies too, because it's like I found myself watching a lot more TV, like watching an hour here or there of like a show. It's been like way harder to sit down, for me at least, and watch like a movie.
Yeah.
Because I think I took for granted how much I did that at a theater, how much I would like go to the theater to be like, this is where I will watch my movies. And like, maybe at home we'll watch an old movie we like or something like that. But yeah, like, I mean, the fact was that every one of these Best Picture nominees we watched at home because they were.
And there's something I felt like this year I'm usually very like connected and like, oh, what's happening, what's coming out. But because I was lacking that intentionality of like, I normally like go, hey, it's January, it's time to start like seeing these films. We got the screeners, but it just kind of felt like not an urgent, important thing. I couldn't even remember when the Oscars were. Like, I was just like, yeah, movies. It's weird. Yeah, the dedication of going. I kind of missed that aspect of being like, I'm going to go to a space to watch something versus just like, hey, what are we going to watch tonight? Which often drifts towards more comfort viewing,
Oh
or
yeah,
like, hey, let's
definitely.
just rewatch Lost for the third time. Like, it's like,
oh yeah,
I found myself drifting more towards those things than like seeking out new movies,
yeah.
which, yeah,
And
maybe
I mean,
that's
I
how it is
think
for most people every year. I don't know.
probably. And
Right.
I definitely felt like with these best picture nominees too, like it was, I have to sit down and watch this movie because I know this is going to be an awards movie. And I honestly, it's like I found myself enjoying. I'm looking at this list right now and I'm like, aside from the one we both didn't see, I'm like, I enjoyed most of these movies.
Right.
I
Right.
think, I,
To, and to set it up, I'm curious, before we dive into all the individual pictures, what was sort of your, with the year that we had, and in many ways continues to spill over,
oh yeah.
what is sort of your takeaway from like film? Like, I feel like I'm going to look back on this last year, and despite it being strange for a lot of reasons, remember the kind of films and media that I paid attention to. For me, at least, the films that really stuck out on this list, and even just some of the ones that I felt like were maybe overlooked, there is such a distinct through line that I think is shaped by my experience of going through the pandemic and how those films leapt out to me because of the
Yeah.
headspace we were in, notably like films like Palm Springs, or
Mm-hmm.
on this list particular, like Sound of Metal, like films that were about, hey, what happens when your life, the life that you thought you had, completely ceases and now you're stuck in this
Totally.
sort of exit. Like I go, would those films have resonated with me had it just been a regular year? Would we even be talking about them? I'm curious
Totally.
if the pandemic of it all has actually influenced what films rose to the surface and felt like they were of the moment and urgent. What is your
Yeah.
takeaway on films of 2020 in general?
Well, it's like I feel like until the fall when these movies started to come out, there like wasn't any movies. Like, I mean, aside from stuff that happened at the beginning of last year that, like the last movies I saw in theaters, like Birds of Prey, or
Right.
I think the last movie we saw was I saw Emma, which I really enjoyed.
Same. That was the last movie we saw. Was
And then
Emma and Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
those
are
are
the
the two
last two
movies.
films.
Those are the last two movies I saw exactly as well. But
we are the same
but again,
person.
like Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a good example where it's like between both those movies, Emma is a movie that I feel like I could throw on this year at home and be like, I enjoyed this movie, and I might have enjoyed it even more so because I got to see it in the theater. Whereas like Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a movie where I'm like, thank God I saw that in a theater, because that would just I think we can all give ourselves a little bit of a break, this year with like attention span and like being able to sit and focus on like a movie. But the theater is always the best for that, to engage in that. And I found myself slipping on a lot of these movies of the list this year with like attention, where I'd be like, I would watch part of it and I would go do something else. And
I would do a thing where I'd go to the kitchen and I leave the sound on and
be like, I
kind of
can
check
hear
in
this.
and be
I
like,
can hear this.
very distracted.
And I think like on a technical basis, you could break that down to a lot of like movies that were intended to see in theaters, or movies that maybe had like a scale or a scope that was more like, wow, this is a movie theater movie, not even like it being a genre thing. It's just like, this just feels like a movie theater movie, as opposed to like, oh, I could watch this movie anywhere. This is, like when I think a couple of years ago, I think we watched Moonlight at home. I don't think we saw Moonlight in a theater because it was like a SAG movie we got.
Right.
And I think like there's a few movies on this list that I was like, oh yeah, it's the same thing, where we put it on. I was like, I could watch this anywhere. And then somewhere it's like, I probably needed to be in a space with a bunch of people where the lights are out, and maybe I would have just like rolled through to the end of this clean.
And have a different perspective because you're sort of forced to watch it versus being like, I'm going to sandwich this in between just trying to like, survive.
I mean, this year made me, it's like, it really made me empathize more with the Scorsese line of thinking, back in the day, where it was just like early Netflix, when it was like, people aren't meant to watch movies on their phones and stuff. And I'm like, I kind of get it this year. I kind of get it a little bit this year with some of these films. But yeah, it was interesting. I up until the fall when stuff started coming out, but then recently I've really been loving like King Kong versus Godzilla on HBO
Right.
Max. And I was like, give it to me. Give me this big thing that is not great, but I just want to enjoy it. It's like because I think I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I just want to feel like I'm in the movies again so bad that I will watch this and I will enjoy it. I'm glad I can enjoy it at home, but I just can't wait to watch it like in a theater, something like this in a theater again.
Yeah, I think it definitely like it's easy to be snobby and go, oh, it's cinema, the theater. But I go, I like being deprived of it. It's like, yes, it's cool to have things on streaming, but it kind of reminds me of the days of going to Blockbuster when there was this intentionality where you go, I'm going to Blockbuster. I'm going to spend 30, 45 minutes combing through. I'm going to pick my choice. And that's the thing we're going to watch. And I feel like as cool as streaming is and as accessible as it is, it makes things very disposable and very like whatever.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. I think the closest I got to feeling like going to the movies this year was probably watching WandaVision. Like that was the closest like, oh, I'm experiencing something with it, could because I was watching it and tweeting about it and collectively
100%.
experiencing it, you know.
100%.
Everything else was just fragmented. Like anybody seen this movie? And most people hadn't, and it'd be like, all right.
Yeah, or like the seasons of this year where it was like, oh yes, July through September when we just watched all of The Office. And it was just like, that was just a time. But yeah, I totally feel the same about WandaVision. And recently, like after WandaVision, I was like, I'm gonna rewatch all the Marvel movies. And so I've just been going through and watching them one by one. And I think I'm on Civil War right now.
It's so funny you say that. That was our viewing habit this year, was picking different franchises and going we did all Star Wars, we did all Lord of the Rings, we did all the we got like halfway through Marvel stuff, but just being like, why not? Because there's really no big blockbuster mainstream things happening, and gave us a chance to revisit some of those things, which was kind of cool.
The Marvel stuff has really made me brought me a lot of comfort lately, which is like shock that I was thinking about it the other day, because it's like there's a lot going on right now. We're doing a lot around here, and it's like just having watching those movies is bringing me such joy. And I'm like, I did not anticipate this to be something that would like really feel like comfort stuff. And I was kind of like driving around the other day, and I was thinking about when I got home, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to get home and like finish Ant-Man.
Yeah.
And I was like, a movie I haven't seen since the theaters. And I think when it was in the theaters, was going, this was fine, you know? But it's like,
I didn't know the joy I would feel at watching a lizard punch an ape. I was like, this is great.
So much joy. And I think like also watching all the Marvel movies in a row too, I'm like, wow, they did a great job with these. They did a good job. Like, because I know at the time when those movies came out, there would be like, oh, Ant-Man's like the heist movie. And but they were all spread out over years that you're kind of like, it kind of just feels like the same movie I'm watching again. But when you're watching them in a row, you're like, oh, wow, they really did make these different movies, and like in a fun way that they feel like distinctive. And
it's such a strange thing too, with the fact that so many Marvel things got bumped because of the pandemic, and then it kind of rolled right into WandaVision and Falcon, which kind of felt like in many ways continuations of those. And I went, oh my God, this is exactly what they've been building towards, pandemic aside, which is kind of making film more episodic, like taking a television approach to movies. So instead of like the 22 episode saga, it's like each one is kind of just their own chapter of a TV show in a weird way. I don't know if that I think people, it hurts cinema. I'm like, I don't know. I think
it's good for that. It's like, you're not going to do that with like any of these movies. You're not going to make like the cinematic universe of Nomadland, but it's like, it's fun to do it for Marvel, because it's like,
although with Chloe Zhao directing the Eternals and Nomadland, I'd like to feel like there's some kind of cinematic crossover there. That would be thrilling. Well, let's dive into these.
Let's do it.
Best pictures, and then we can, chat about like films we thought were, overlooked or snubbed or whatever. But just diving into it, what stands out to you this year as like out of these films? Is there a film that really leaps out to you as a defining film that you say like, that is the film I'm going to look back and remember out of these nominated lists. For me, I feel like the one that I gravitated towards the most this year was Sound of Metal. That movie rocked my world in a way because, again, I think it's because of the year we had, being this film that's about this person who is, I felt there was this actually really interesting triangle, like kind of connective tissue between Nomadland, Sound of Metal, and Soul, which are all three films about people who believe their life was going to be a certain thing. They were going to be doing a certain thing.
Yeah.
What happens when all of that fades away, be it loss of hearing, be it the loss of your job, husband, town you live in disappearing, loss of your body.
I don't
like
think
all of them had that connective tissue to me.
I think Soul was the one, and it's because it's probably got that like Pixar charm where, you know, I'm going into it, have an idea that I'm like, I know this is gonna make me cry at one point, and like, you know, it's gonna use its little like its tools for that purpose, that it really, I was like, whoa, that they stuck the landing. And I definitely think Sound of Metal did the exact same thing too. I think that movie was very good. I was gonna say my one was Minari on this list, just because that was the one where I was like, oh, I like finished that movie, and the whole movie I was just like, I'm riveted by this movie. I am riveted 100% by everything that's going on in this movie. And that was the movie where I was like, I could watch this anywhere, you know. Sound of Metal was one where I was enjoying it so much, but I was like, this would be fun to see in a theater because of like the sound, the use of the sound in it. But
by the way, I recently rewatched that film with the recommendation from somebody of actually doing it with headphones, and talk about a completely different and immersive experience. I loved watching it the first time, but boy, the sound design on Sound of Metal in particular, like you said, I think a theatrical setting would be ideal.
A great idea.
Yeah, because it really immerses you into his experience. Yeah.
So that's initially what I would say, but let's deal with the elephant in the room here.
The one film we haven't seen is The Father. Why haven't you seen The Father?
Why haven't I seen The Father?
We both got screeners. It's sitting there.
Because there was
it's going to be probably amazing, but
yeah, it's one of those movies where like The Wife that came out a couple of years ago with, and it was like The Wife, The Father, and I was like, I just have a good idea of what this movie is. You know, I think in a year where it's like it's like you've had all the time in the world, but you're also like more discerning with your time. Where, you know, like in the before times where we had so much stuff going on and we were bouncing around and everything, and I would still find a way to go see 3 movies a week. It's like I'd see anything. I'd see literally anything when I probably had less time to do it. And this year, it's been this odd phenomenon of having more time than ever, but being like, I don't need to watch this. I don't need to watch. I know kind of what this is going to be. And
I'm intrigued by the premise that it's based off of a play. I think that's kind of interesting.
Sure.
I'm intrigued by the setup.
Insane. They're both amazing, incredible. It's like, it is everything that should make a good movie.
And I'm intrigued by the anti-Oscar-ness of it, in the sense of like, I go on its, I don't know if you've watched the trailer, but like on its surface, I go, a traditional Oscar film is all about Olivia Colman reeling in tragedy as her father-in-law disintegrates. In actuality, it seems the movie is more about, it's his experience and you're inside of his reality, and almost like a surreal, like, who did that movie? I think of Ending Things.
Charlie Kaufman.
Charlie Kaufman, almost like a Charlie Kaufman-esque kind of film, which is like a really intriguing premise. But just knowing there's people in my family that have dementia, and it just felt like one of those things where I kept coming back and going, not today. For some reason, everything else I didn't have any, even the stuff that I thought would be heavier, I was like
Judas and the Black Messiah, where you're like, this is going to be a heavy movie that we're going to like buckle in for.
Right.
But
I guess in some way that it's almost like the films that I go, there's something I can take away and then possibly do about it. I can learn something and apply it to my life. And I go, what's the, like, what can you do about this? It just felt like anyway, I know I've listened to several critics who were like, you probably think it's like The Wife, but it's not. And I'm like, but I still don't want to watch it yet. I will one day. So
I will.
It could sweep, and we will have no idea why.
It was one of the few SAG screeners I think we kept because I was like, I need to watch this movie. And it's like, that was the annoying thing about SAG screeners this year. It's like, I don't need any of these because all of these are streaming. I think I kept Promising Young Woman, Minari, and The Father because I went.
And so many Netflix screeners. So many Netflix screeners. Don't send us physical discs.
Stop wasting all these resources. Yeah. So same. Haven't watched it. Not sure when. If it like wins any big categories, I'll be like, I should watch this probably soon. Yeah. Like if Anthony Hopkins pulls a huge upset and wins, then I'd be like, I should watch this then.
Yeah.
But as of now, I think I'm just gonna assume it's a very good movie.
Yeah. So we have nothing to offer in terms of that. Let's dive into these other 7 nominations. Only 8 nominations this year total, which I believe is not. I know some people are like they should have included 2 more. I don't even think that's possible. It's more like if films don't get a certain number of votes, they just won't make it. It's not like the Academy chooses to block 2 people. It's literally just, or 2 films. It's like a numbers thing. So we only have 8 films. So the first one on this list is Judas and the Black Messiah.
Great.
This movie rocked my world. I mean, the weird thing, of course, the bizarre Lakeith and
Daniel
Kaluuya, not being leads and both being listed as guests, supporting actors. I suspect that's a studio thing, but man, I thought they were this movie it comes out hot and it just grabbed you by the collar and it doesn't let up. And I thought it was just riveting. I didn't know the story at all. I had no context. I had no background.
I didn't realize Daniel Kaluuya's character is the same character in Trial of Chicago 7.
Fred Hampton.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And that the events of this movie took place like basically right after the events of that movie, essentially.
Yeah.
This another movie where, oh my God, Dominique Fishback, who plays his girlfriend, who was in that movie Power.
Oh, that's right. Right.
Am I getting that right? That I watched randomly.
That's the Jamie Foxx superhero one. Yeah.
Project Power, that one. What's her? Yeah, Dominique Fishback. She was so good. A movie as soon as I saw the trailer, as soon as I knew what was going on, I was like, I'm gonna love this movie. I'm gonna
I was surprised that it was actually more of a, I don't know, Scorsese-esque thriller. Like I thought it was gonna be pure like drama, time period, like racial tension. It has that. But there is this kind of element of with him being this sort of mole and it almost reminded me of Black Klansman a little bit,
or like The Departed or something where you're like, oh yeah,
Departed meets like Black Klansman. Like it had that. I don't want to say fun and games because I don't mean that like to diminish it, but it kind of had this aspect of
this cat and mouse.
Yeah, and then in that second act when things really kind of the weight hits of it, I just that last moment, and just for reg, we probably will spoil some of these films.
Oh yeah, it is. So
that last moment when there's that reveal of the actual person that Lakeith Stanfield is portraying, when he talks about the fact that he has an interview and then he took his life. I mean, that just like destroyed me. And obviously that's the film. I don't know if the film is sort of suggesting like that was guilt, but it's hard not to read into that. And I felt like Lakeith's performance, by the way, Lakeith Stanfield is just
so good. Regardless of whether or not
beaten path actor,
regardless of whether or not it was like appropriate for him to get a supporting actor versus a lead or whatever that is, it's like, it is very nice to be like, oh great, he's being officially recognized as a very good actor, which he is. And like, I never know what he's going to do. He's one of those actors where you're watching a scene being like, if I was auditioning for this or like reading the script, I would never think to make the choices you're making. He's endlessly watchable to me. It's so interesting. Yeah.
But I think he doesn't have the flashier performance there. I think Daniel Kaluuya gets the impassioned speeches and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But Lakeith Stanfield is holding it together because you're seeing it all through his eyes. And I feel like he's almost like not getting enough credit. I feel like a lot of it's going to the more bombastic thing, which he's amazing at, Daniel Kaluuya. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think Lakeith is so good in this movie.
Yeah, he has to just play. Watching anyone play like both sides of something and know where they're at, and especially with like the stakes of a movie like this, is just endlessly fascinating. It's just endlessly fascinating, especially when someone does it well, like he
Right.
does. Yeah, I thought this movie was great. Again, it's kind of like expected this movie to be great, and was like, oh, this was great.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
yeah, it was great.
And I would say like more entertaining than I expected, but still with the weight and the
Mhm.
impact. You know, it wasn't this soul crushing movie I thought it would be, but it still really like moved me. And
Yeah.
so for anybody on the fence, I think it's well worth a watch. And not, I know sometimes people are like, oh, Oscar movies, like I'm not ready to be devastated like
No,
us with
this
the Father.
doesn't feel,
But
this doesn't feel, and this also, it's like, aside from maybe one of these movies on this list that I'm not quite sure timing wise, it's also like not an insanely long movie. It feels like a
Right.
movie that would be like 3 hours, and you're like, no, this is like it's a good length.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed that movie immensely. Yeah.
Well, next on the list, we have the Sean Prasad starring vehicle, David Fincher's Sean Prasad, the movie. We have Mank.
Yeah.
Mank. What are your thoughts on Mank? First of all, Sean is great.
Sean,
what are your thoughts on
so great?
Sean plays his driver. But yeah, this is an interesting movie that I've been listening to a lot. There's a lot of critical kind of like, some people love it. Some people felt it was really underwhelming. I'm sort of still trying to wrap my head around what the movie is.
This was a good example of a movie that I wish I could have seen in theaters and like forced to sit and like engage in this movie, because it was all too easy with this movie to like pause and like go to the bathroom or be like, I got to do something real quick, and then like pick it back up a few minutes later. And I don't think that, because the movie really intertwines and weaves a lot between timelines and things like that. So I found myself very confused by a lot of this movie. I was like confused about what was going on. And at the end of the day, I wasn't sure what it was trying to like say about the character for being this long kind of movie.
And it gets really political, which is not really a thing I expected.
But
I wasn't.
But again, I was kind of like, wasn't sure what the politics were about necessarily. Right. I was like, okay, so it's about like, he's writing a movie about William Randolph Hearst, and he doesn't want him to, but like, why again? Right. I mean, technically, this movie was like endlessly fascinating to watch.
I was gonna say, I think I appreciated the aesthetics of it on an immense level. Even the sound design of it, feeling like it's filmed on an old sound stage, and
endlessly enjoyable and like fun to watch, and some really like great character performances in it. Like
Amanda Seyfried's great.
Charles Dance is always like fun to watch, and like Gary Oldman's great. He's always great. Right. And the guy who did what's his name? Who's the director? My God.
Oh, Orson Welles.
He's
phenomenal.
Great. He's fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, I just couldn't quite like, I'm trying to think of like another example of a Fincher movie that it feels like, and I would probably say something like Zodiac.
Right.
In pure length of like watching this whole thing go on over decades in time. And
it's interesting with the fact that I believe his father wrote the screenplay like in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I mean, knowing that, obviously it's easy to take from that what you will, but there is this quality. I'm like, yeah, it kind of feels like a film that's been percolating, and I don't know. It feels like, did you see Little Things? The Denzel Washington, Rami Malek movie?
No, I decided against it. I was considering it, and then I was like, maybe I don't. Again, another movie I was like, maybe not.
Yeah. Similar thing where you're watching it being like, was this written in 1992? Turns out it was. That's when the script was
Sure.
written, and then they've been sitting on it for a long time.
Or
And
like
I
Motherless Brooklyn, that
right.
Ed Norton movie that I also started to watch. I was like, this movie just feels like people have been really thinking about this movie for a long time, and it's like,
And that's not to disparage like old films
of
or
course,
anything,
no, no,
but
no, no, no.
yeah, I
But
guess being a Fincher, what's so weird is the night before I rewatched Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which
such
is
a good
just
movie.
like
I mean, all
it's
of his
out
movies,
like a bullet,
all
you
of his
know?
movies just have like an electricity throughout them where it feels like once you start, you're on the train to the end, and
Yeah,
you're
and
like,
it feels so
whoa,
controlled, and you are
yeah.
like, I am in this person's hands,
And I
and
felt
this
that
film,
in
I got to
this.
the station, and I went, I don't know where I am.
Yeah, I'm not sure where. Like that whole scene at the end where he like gets drunk at the dinner party, or shows up drunk, and like the whole like climax of the movie. I was like, this is a great scene. I'm not sure why we're here.
Right,
It's
right,
like it felt like all the pieces and parts of a really great David Fincher movie, but I was just like, I'm not quite sure what why it's all together
right,
is the
right.
thing. But I will say
Yeah,
that the catalyst of the whole movie, which was Sean Prasad losing control of the wheel, was pretty. I mean,
was
the
fantastic.
movie wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have been set off on the track in the first place without Sean Prasad in that
And I
movie.
remember, do you remember like I think we went to Alamo Draft House
When he
right
found out
after,
he
yeah,
got
like
it.
or maybe he had just filmed. Yeah, no, you're right. He had just found out he had gotten it, and that was like what, December 2019, I think,
Oh,
or
had to
2018.
be earlier. Yeah,
Yeah, so it was
because
cool to
we
see
saw
that come full
Jojo
circle.
Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit. That's right. That's right.
So it would have been, was it 2019?
I think it was December 2019
And then
is
he
when he.
filmed, I think he filmed like 2 days, like he filmed maybe in January and then maybe again in like early February before
Exactly.
things happen, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
Wow. Full
Yeah.
circle.
Well,
The next film,
that's kind
yeah,
of my
no, good.
thought.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
I think it's a great experiment, and I think it's worth watching. And I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know
I
if I
think
would.
I think they pulled it off in that sense, in the sense of like trying to recreate, like technically I think it's like an insane achievement. And I'm like,
Exactly.
that's cool, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The next film we have on the list is it seems like your standout for
loved
the
it.
year, Minari. What about this film resonated with you so much? Because I feel like on this list, this is the most quiet and gentle. I
Small
mean, there's still
movie.
a lot of tension in it, but I feel like this is
Yeah.
the one that it felt like the most, I don't know, a balm, you know, like it
Uh-huh.
just felt
Well,
like a very, yeah,
you kind of kept waiting in the movie. I feel like, most movies condition you to be like, "Oh, this thing's going to happen." Like when the
and
little
then
boy's
they're gonna get hit
running.
by a car,
Yeah,
or
like when the little boy's running and you're like, his heart's going to give out.
right,
And you're like, and you can tell and you're like, "Oh no, his heart's going to give out." And then it doesn't. Or like when the barn was on fire and you're like, the parents are going to die in the barn. The parents are going
yep.
to die in the barn.
You're
And then they
waiting for
don't.
that tragedy hammer to just drop, and it does a really
Yeah.
cool thing where it forces you to focus on these smaller moments and engage
Mhm.
more on a character level, and that's the compelling aspect. And it says we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, you
Yeah,
know.
and I
There is
think,
tragedy, absolutely, but
of
it's
course, and I think,
even with the grandmother, I feel like that moment where you realize what's happened to her, it's done so, I think she suffers a stroke, right?
mhm.
It doesn't feel like it just happens. It felt so jarring because it felt like real life, where it's not like, and the sad music's playing and she's feeling she just wakes up and something happened in the night. And I
Yeah,
just felt like that was it puts you in that moment of like, yeah, when tragedy happens, you don't usually get a heads up that like, oh, it's about to get sad.
I think on the
And
same
yeah,
token that you had mentioned, a lot of the movies follow this, like when your world gets turned upside down. And I think in a sense, this movie follows a little bit of that trend in the sense that they're very fish out of water in this town. But what I loved about this movie was it felt like, especially at the end of this year, where you said there's a lot of stuff a lot of huge changes. A lot of people's lives got turned upside down, and this movie kind of felt like, yeah, that's your expectation of like, oh my God, how are they going to deal with some crazy thing? And it's like, they just kind of keep going. They just like have to keep going and get through that thing and get to the next thing. And then we're at the next thing. And it's just, and to me, I was like, this is the most like realistic depiction of life in a movie, just because you go, that is what it is you just go,
and his dreams, his aspirations are so they're not like
transferable
this,
to everything.
Yeah, it's like he wants to grow vegetables and sell them in Oklahoma City. Like, it's not like, he's going
he
to
wants to build the biggest farm in the world or like invent something crazy. It's like, no.
But it's so deeply personal to him. And it's that classic example of when a film, the more specific it is to that experience, the more universal it becomes.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't understand growing vegetables, but I understand what it's like to go, if I could just get this thing in my life to work, we could have it,
and like the neighbor guy, the like religious neighbor guy, who you're like, the whole movie you're going, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna do something crazy? And you're like, no, he's just this guy. And he's just, I loved that movie so much. And it was so funny. It made me laugh.
It's funny.
A lot.
It's really funny.
Yeah, it was.
I'm so glad she was nominated for an Oscar too,
and that
she's
such probably gonna win too.
Yeah,
it seems like she's favored to win because she just won last night again for the Independent Spirit Awards. And I'm like, this is great. This is like one of those things where I'm like, yes, I love it. I love everything about this. So it's tough because it's like I would also love, it's like if Stephen Yeun won, that would be amazing too. But I loved this.
I don't want to butcher the name, but Yoo Jung Yun is, I believe, her name. I just want to make sure.
The grandmother.
Who was the grandmother? All right. Well, the next film we had, and this is probably my second. The film that I've watched 3 times now that also resonated with me the most, Bad and Sound of Metal, but this is Nomadland, Chloe Zhao directed film. And this movie, did you see The Writer? Which is her first film. It's so fascinating. No. She's a filmmaker.
Wait, I have to use the bathroom real quick.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Hold on one second. We'll cut this out. We'll cut this out later.
In the meantime, we'll go to YouTube and see if any questions. Hey, thanks everybody on YouTube for watching. Thanks for tuning in. This is fun. How's everybody doing? Love Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit is fantastic. Really selling this movie, so I want to watch it now. That's the goal. Yes, guys, I want to sell you on these movies that I love, because the best part about movies is having a conversation about them. Also, for anybody who's wondering why Joey and I are doing this every single year for the last, I want to say 5 years now, we've done an Oscar podcast of my podcast, Story Matters. And so Joey was kind enough, despite his crazy schedule, to hop on and do this. I was like, literally yesterday, 2 days ago, I was like, yo, should we do one? So I'm really grateful that he hopped on. I have seen part of Wolfwalkers. Sorry, I was answering questions. Oh, have you seen Wolfwalkers, by the way?
I watched part of it too. I didn't finish it.
Gotcha.
But I didn't finish it either. Enjoying it.
Really interesting animation style.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
But again, I think another movie where I'm like, I wish I could go see this in the theaters.
Same.
Just because like I was watching it and enjoying it, and then I think like something came up and I was like, I'll finish watching this later. And then I'm like, I just didn't, which was, it's just the age-old problem of the year. But so Nomadland, The Writer.
Yeah, the Nomadland. So what's so interesting about Chloe Zhao is she, with The Writer, the movie is about a real person and his experience of, he basically was kicked from a horse, almost paralyzed, all this stuff, his kind of road to recovery. She made a movie about him and then cast him and all of his friends and family. Mm-hmm. So it's this interesting blend of documentary meets fiction. And I think with Nomadland, it's a beautiful film. Mm-hmm. She kind of takes that to the next level, where a lot of people that you see in this movie are also real people. But then, of course, we have Frances McDormand at the center playing this hybrid of characters based off of a book that was a journalistic exploration of people who live a nomadic life. So it's this really interesting hybrid between, it like feels like half like documentary and half like a film. And I again, this is a movie that I had no expectations going into it. I was like, oh, is it going to be a super depressing movie? And yeah, it is in some ways, but I felt like this movie in particular stood out to me because it's about this woman who is sort of faced with obsolescence, if you will. Like her life as she knows it has been completely um, brought to a halt. And what do you do with that? When you have, what do? Do you sit there and you just go, well, I'm done? Or do you find a way to adapt and a way to change? And
Which
watching
is
that
again another movie of the year.
Watching that at
Another
the end
movie
of,
indicative.
I think I saw it in January. I just was like, whoa, this idea, you know, there's a monologue that one of the guys gives when he talks about like, you know, being like workhorses put out to pasture. And he's like, you know, and what we do is we take care of, you know, we're the horses that take care of each other. And I don't know, it just hit me in a very vulnerable moment.
Oh yeah.
and it was just right before I think vaccine rollout had really ramped up, and we were still like, is 2021 going to be the exact same? So I think I was at a really like dark moment and to see this film and for it to speak with a lot of hopefulness about like, you can still find meaning even when the life you think you were going to have has fallen apart. I don't know. It blew me away. And I sincerely love this movie.
I totally agree with you. I think this is easily my like number 2, which is probably why this movie will, as we know, the tiered voting of the Oscars works. It's like, if this movie is solidly everyone's like number 2, but I'm assuming it's a lot of people's number 1s as well, this will very likely win Best Picture, it seems like, which is great. I was so blown away because I never saw The Rider. So like, as I was watching the movie too, it was this surreal realization of like, are all these people, like whoever cast these people did such an insanely good job. And then like realizing that a lot of these people, like, oh, they are these people. This is what they do. They are these folks. Yeah, it was incredible. It was like, and I think totally for the same reasons what you said of what it represents about moving through life and work and loss and every like the actual, like a road movie that is like about the road of life, and you're like, wow, amazing. But
and you know, the work thing really stuck out to me too, because I feel like, I know some of the criticism of this movie is that it doesn't go hard enough on Amazon or being pro, whatever. That is a different conversation. And I feel like that's, to me, reading like the movie isn't what you wanted it to be.
And it's kind of like, that's not what they were trying to do. So don't put that on the movie.
But you and I would say, not to categorize you, but I think we put a lot of value in the work we do. And I think we've, in a large part, it's a very personal thing as actors and performers, as writers and creators. And the idea that this life that she had, the work that she did, that she found meaningful, the entire town that she like occupied ceases to exist. And so that the work she does is like, it's this more like, hey, you don't live to work, you work to live. I just love the idea that like, she takes a job at she doesn't, Amazon stint for the holidays. Then she goes and serves food. And then she's like scrubbing. There's a kind of this dignity in saying like, your job is not the thing that brings you joy. And it's the life that you're living, the community you're living with, and that you can just work to pay the bills. And like, I don't know, that really struck me because being unable to do so many of the things that we do in the last year, I was struck by like, oh my God, like, what does that say about my value as a person? If the bulk of my work is not my art, and realizing like, that's okay. Like, that's okay. Like, I don't know, that aspect of it, the work aspect, and seeing how she goes from place to place, and then she takes the work that she gets, and there's a dignity to it. I just thought that was a really beautiful idea, and it hit me really hard as I was doing all these weird, odd jobs that from home to make money.
I wasn't sure exactly what it was trying to, because at the end of the day, it's like there was a temptation or a like an opportunity for her to like settle more, the same way like David Strathairn just is kind of like, I'm here now, I'm like with my family and we're at this house, and she doesn't take it. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of, it seems to me in a way like also beyond work, could be a commentary on the way, like, you know, that there's a stigma of like people who don't want kids, or people who like, who it's just kind of like, this is the way they've chosen to live.
Even the stigma where the girl at the like sporting goods store is like, are you homeless? You know, and she's like, no, this is just how I choose to live. Like, oh, wow, what did you do to get yourself into this bad situation? Versus like, no, I'm choosing to live the life that I want to live, and kind of destigmatizing that. I thought that was a really interesting conversation to be had. And it shows you how vulnerable. I watched this with some of my patrons, and one of my patrons, I don't know if you know Marty or not. Marty's amazing. Marty was talking about like, she's like, I believe like early 60s. And she was like, this movie hit me so hard because she was like, if I lost my job tomorrow, what am I going to do? Right. Like, our country does not take care of people. And as they age up, you know, we're like, young people, young entrepreneurial people are so sexy. And then you're like, oh, you've worked your entire life and now your industry's shut down. Like, well, good luck to you. And that perspective that she brought really just gave me a whole new insight into, you know, even people in my own family are been trying to find jobs and work because their industries have shut down. It's tough. And I think in some ways you and I we can like adapt and technology, whatever. For some people, it's like, that's not going to work out for them. And what do they do? I don't know. That brought up a lot of questions for me too.
No, I mean, and we're seeing it still. It's like, I don't know if you saw this article about, so Second City in Chicago was like sold to a bigger like corporation earlier in the year, and like all their front of house and like night staff, like bartenders and servers, were all fired.
Man.
And
UCB, same, right?
And told that they were going to like have to reapply for their jobs. And just recently came out that Second City's like hiring, they're like outsourcing to another company. And it's like, some of these people, there was like a bartender who worked there for 40 years. And it's just like, yeah, I think like, you know, there's the kind of like lower working class in America too, I think can very easily be stigmatized in a certain way because of like politics also in the last several years. I think that's very easy for that to happen. And I think this was like a really nuanced perspective of like, of like the working class in America that I don't think we get to see a lot, because it's so easily like looked at like this, you know, or there's like you're talking like how the girl goes like, are you homeless? And it's like, no, there's so much more nuance to this whole, to like millions of people in this country, that I think this movie did a excellent job of being like, whoa, did not even know this was like a community. And
it touches on really complicated things, like the woman who's talking about like, you know, I looked at my social security and I'm only going to get like what, $500 a month. I can't live on that.
Yeah.
And you're like, and she's
a lot
like,
of
I worked for
questions
40
people
years.
Probably needed to ask like this year with unemployment and tons of stuff. Yeah.
The woman who's dying and who chooses to live her life, the rest of her life, kind of exploring the world as opposed to in a hospital. Like, I don't know. There's all these things that the film, I think the critique has been, it doesn't come down on them enough, but I like that the movie just says, look, these are just people going through life. It's a lot to unpack. And I'm so, not to go back to Marvel, but like, what does a Chloe Zhao Marvel movie look like? I'm like trying to wrap my head around that.
Can't wait.
Kevin Feige apparently said it is the best pitch he's ever gotten for anything ever. He said her pitch for Eternals is the best pitch I've ever heard. And I believe it, because I think she's going to win best director this year too.
It's cool to think that like that movie was supposed to come out before this movie.
Right.
Which is shocking. It's like, oh, this movie was supposed to come out like, or maybe wasn't it supposed to come out like over the last summer or something?
Yeah.
Or in the fall, like maybe
November. That's
so
interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's nuts. But I love her and I love this movie, and I'm like, and I love Frances McDormand. It's like, she's kind of like, what, unbelievable.
She's you almost take her for granted because you're like, oh, of course. Yeah. So I think Nomadland is probably a lock for best picture. Wouldn't be mad about it.
And
I think it's really remarkable.
Would be very pleased about it.
Yeah. So the next film we have is Promising Young Woman.
This was a divisive movie, and I didn't think of where did you land on this movie?
I really appreciated the style of it.
Yeah.
I thought it was much more entertaining than I thought. My sort of conception of it ahead of time was it was going to be a kind of you know, the opening scene. I think there's a moment where you see her sitting there and you're like, oh my God, is this where the film is going? Are we going to have to watch some horrible shit go down? I don't know if I want to put myself through that. And then there's this moment in the movie where she turns the script on you and you realize like, okay, Carey Mulligan's character is fully in control. And I think that moment I started to kind of have fun with the movie. I know the movie deals with heavy things.
Oh yeah.
My favorite thing about the movie is this idea of the casting choices, especially with like Adam Brody and what's his name? Schmidt.
Max Greenfield.
Greenfield, Bo Burnham, who are like, you're like, they're like fun, nice guys. And I love the exploration of showing sort of pulling off the like face mask of that facade. I thought that was such an interesting way to approach it because it's not like it deals in it's a lot more sticky and complicated of a character. Like you're like, yeah, like Bo Burnham's a nice guy, and then you find out maybe he's not. I don't know. I think it brings up a lot of interesting questions. I don't think this film sticks the landing. The end of it I felt like it was so kooky, convenient and like, wait, there's a lot of things that I don't understand.
Yeah,
the Rube Goldberg of it all, I don't quite understand. But
I did as soon as this movie finished, because I think we watched this before Minari, and at the time I love this movie. I think it's great, and like it's definitely like I know a lot more people who deeply hated this movie.
I know a lot of people who hated it,
and I was like, I didn't hate it. And I'm trying to be like, why did you hate it? And like a lot of people, if you like some people, I had a friend who said like, it's like if an Instagram filter made a movie. And I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. And then our friend Esther do you see Esther's post about it on, what's the
Letterboxd?
No,
I haven't.
And it was some, I forget what she said. It was something where it was like about it kind of being like a Christopher Nolan movie for girls. It was like something like that, where I was just, I don't think that was it. But yeah, it felt like people had like a very visceral reaction to like how this movie told this story, basically. And I was like, I don't know. Especially when you look at it in a list compared to all these other movies, I'm like, it's so different, and it is kind of like poppy and commercially, and got some bright colors. And I think
Esther wrote, "I'm sorry, but this is Christopher Nolan for girls."
Was that it? Okay, good.
That's
okay.
what
I was right.
It's a one-line review.
Yeah.
By the way, do yourself a favor if you're on Letterboxd and follow Esther's Letterboxd.
Yeah, it's very good.
Great.
But
the Spies review in particular is fantastic.
Oh, okay. But to me, I was kind of like, I don't really know what that means. I'm kind of like, what does that?
I feel like it's a movie that
what's the problem?
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, I do feel like it's a movie that I think it wants to be about really big, daring ideas. But at the end of the day, I'm like, it's kind of a little more style over substance
Definitely.
But I say that as like a dude, so I'm like, that may not be my place to say that at all.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day with this movie, I know what it was trying to say. I know what it was trying to do. I agree with you, where at the end of it, I was kind of like, not every movie needs, I think I'm trying to be very forgiving of like, not every movie needs to like, be like, wow.
Exactly.
We all agree that's what it said, and that's what it did it. And it's like, kind of, it's just exploring like, a style. It's like exploring a version of this in which this character goes about, because it's like there's another version of this movie that tells essentially the same story in a totally different way. And it's kind of like this movie just chose to tell it this way, and I enjoyed it when I was watching it.
Did you see You're Never Really Here? The Joaquin Phoenix film?
Yeah. Yeah, I know you talk about this movie a lot. This
love
is
that
like
movie.
your
I love that movie, but this kind of felt like I thought it was going to be that, and it's a lot more. I don't want to say lighthearted, but where that movie is, he's like, I found the predator and now I'm going to kill them. This movie is like, I'm just going to make you think really hard about what you did. And I mean, like the scene with like Allison Brie, I kind of love that scene where, but then you're like, oh, did anything happen? I don't know. It's interesting. It's a really interesting exploration, and I here's what I'm blown away by. It's Emerald Fennell's first movie. That to me is all I need to know to go like, holy crap, like whatever you direct, if this is a first film, we're in good hands. So
I think like
I'm glad to say I don't know if it's a film that would have been nominated outside of this year, when I think that's exciting.
Did you ever see that movie Under the Silver Lake? Did you like that movie?
I think I was intrigued by it, and I was left being like, what the crap was that about?
I think that movie is a similar movie where I'm like, that movie is way too much style over substance, in my opinion, or like it's trying to fit too much of both in there. Whereas I felt like, I think this movie is a pretty good balance between the two for what it's worth. I enjoyed watching this movie. Again, another movie that like, I laughed, and then I was like, "Oh my god, I'm feeling very uncomfortable in my skin watching this." And then I'm loving the use, like the play on these tropes and these like characters and this casting. It's like, I'm loving all of this. Like,
I do love it. It's like a satisfying movie, like the scene with Connie Nielsen, or not Connie Nielsen. Is that what it is?
Connie Britton.
Connie Britton. You know, it's just like so satisfying to watch her like do the plan, the phone, and you're like, like that is like, I think that's the joy of the movie, is watching her unleash a plan and watching it work so well. That's like I really enjoyed that. I was like, she's getting them all,
there's a
without
part of
like
this
killing
movie
them.
where I'm like, this movie might have worked also really good as like a limited series.
Yeah. Ooh,
like if you
I feel like yes.
If you broke down each like chapter in the movie, like to be like one episode of a limited series, I'm like, that could also
each kind
really
of like
work.
character she outs would be a really interesting episode. I agree.
Because when we got to the end, to the bachelor party, I was like, it felt like I didn't know who that was going to be or something, or like, I felt like there could have been a little more build up to who that guy was, or because it like pivoted. And so I don't know, but again, it's like, maybe it's the year too where I'm like, I think they did a good job. I don't think there's I don't think like this movie will set off like any sort of trend. I think it's like a movie where people will try to make movies like this. Right. You know what I mean? And they'll probably not be as good or pointed. And then people will go like, we'll turn to this movie and be like, oh, if this movie didn't get made, everyone would have tried to make all these other movies. It's like, who cares? It's just like, I just appreciated this movie. I don't get any of the
I agree.
The extreme kind of like opposition to it. I'm like, what's the problem?
I think my biggest takeaway is I appreciate that it's about people who think they're the good guys. You know, I think that to me is the most complicated thing about the movie, is it's people who like, I didn't do anything wrong. And it's a movie about being complicit. And I think that's really interesting and challenging, and goes a step beyond just like Me Too, of like, don't do these bad things, but also like, but did you know, did you say anything? Did you actually step up and advocate and actually be an ally? And I go, that's a more complicated idea. And I love that the movie tackles it. So I'm a fan.
Same.
2 more movies. We got Sound of Metal, my favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, so good. He is another actor where it's like kind of like Daniel Kaluuya, kind of like Lakeith Stanfield, where you're like, Riz Ahmed is so good and
effortless. This
and
movie.
Sorry,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say another cool surprise in this movie is Paul Rossi, who plays his like mentor at his
counselor
at the thing. He also amazing, and who won the Independent Spirit Award for Best Supporting Actor last night as well. And I like read up a bunch about him, and it's like, he's the son of 2 deaf parents. So it's like
Yeah.
that he's like fluent in ASL, and I'm like, whoa. And it's like, and he's 73 years old, and it's like, I love this. I love
Yeah.
that this guy who is, it's like the same with the grandmother from Minari, where you're like, I love that at your age, you have just been like doing what you're doing, and then like suddenly at the age of 73, you're like, I'm nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Recognized for it.
it's just, yeah, that. And the same thing with a lot of these movies where I loved the community that these main characters found themselves in, similar to with Nomadland, where it's like,
Yeah.
Frances McDormand and Riz Ahmed are both so good, but it's like, it's a lot about them learning from other people around them, which is
Right.
like infinitely more interesting than the main character coming in and being like, I know everything. I'm teaching everyone how to act and what to do. It's like, I love watching these characters like learn in a movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this film was a lot more hopeful than I thought it would be. I thought it was
Mhm.
going to be kind of misery porn. And then there is a lot of tragedy and heartache, but this film has such a beautiful outlook. That last moment is
When he
so
takes off, when
incredible.
he turns the things off.
And he just is present, right? And I think, again, the pandemic of it all, and reading very selfishly into it, I think it just hit me like a ton of bricks, because I'd already, just because of life, been being like, oh my God, it's so hard to do what I try to do. And then all of a sudden, when you're like, yeah, legitimately everything that you thought you were going to do, theater, performing, all that, it's gone. You just can't do any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just to watch this character go through that and still find meaning and purpose and beauty. And it's not in, and I love the idea that it's framed that he's used music as almost his means of recovery. He's a recovering addict, and so music is kind of his escape. And so then he's forced to surrender, and it's not just about him overcoming obstacle and getting back to music. It's actually about him unplugging from it all, and kind of like Nomadland, finding meaning and purpose and just being, and going like, and like Soul. It's like, yes, music is, you love it. Yes. But also, like, if you could never do it again, and I feel this way so often, I'm like, who am I without if I'm not if I'm not an actor, if I'm not a performer? And it's like, well, you're still a person, and you still have an entire life. Even if you never did that thing that people recognize you for again, you still,
or that you think you need to do.
Exactly. And that just, it just washed over me. And Kim and I both just watched this, and I haven't stopped thinking about it.
I want to rewatch it. I want to rewatch it now with headphones, like with these guys.
Yeah.
The way you suggested, I was like, that's probably a good idea.
So immersive. And for my pick, I think Chadwick Boseman will probably win. He's phenomenal. But for my pick, I just feel like this performance for me just rocked my world. I think Agreed. He's so phenomenal in this movie.
And he won last night too, so there's always the chance of like an upset, which would be bizarre and crazy. But yeah,
and then we have the last film on this list is the most kind of Oscar-y movie, I would say, and that's Trial of the Chicago 7. What are your thoughts on this movie? Aaron Sorkin directed and written.
I think Aaron Sorkin is a better writer than director. I felt the same with Molly's Game, where I was like, I loved Molly's Game, but there were so many moments in Molly's Game where it just felt like your direction is futzing with your screenplay here. Like, it's like the best Sorkin movies are like Social Network, which someone else directed, Moneyball, which someone else directed. And like, I think he's got it. And I think, I liked this movie. Like, this was a movie that I enjoyed watching, but as soon as it was over, I was like, I don't remember a lot of this movie. Like, none of it really stuck with me. Like you said, it is the most like by the books Oscar movie. And it felt like, I read an article this morning that was about how like Netflix is really gunning for that Best Picture. They like really want to be like, we have a Best Picture. And I think this movie feels like the most cookie cutter attempt at that, as opposed to like Roma, which was such a good movie and like so just honest, like giving a real auteur just carte blanche to do whatever. This movie felt like, all right, Now we need to put all the pieces together to make a best picture movie.
Right.
What is it? And like, this was
did
what
you
came out.
by any chance see the Small Axe series, the Steve McQueen movies?
No.
I heard some critique about Trial of Chicago 7, and I decided before I watched it to actually watch Small Axe Mangrove, which is about a similar kind of thing. It's a trial of these people put on trial. And you know what's so interesting is I feel like where this movie feels like this very calculated courtroom drama, that movie takes the opposite approach, and it says we're going to immerse you in these characters' lives. And I feel like what I was lacking in this movie, I mean, great acting, performing, everything, but when the rousing moments happen, you're like, yeah, what a brilliantly written monologue. Great. Mangrove, on the other hand, when you get to those moments, you are so deeply intertwined with those characters. You have so much connection to like their life, to the what the consequences of the outcome of the trial are so deeply personal because you are so invested in them. And that's kind of where I felt like this film, I know there's 7 of them, but I'm kind of like, I don't, oh, okay. I don't care about any of them. I admire them.
Of the movie. You can see the scaffolding of like, oh yeah, I see what they were trying to do in this movie. And like, there's some stuff like, listen, I think Sacha Baron Cohen is great. He's doing a bad accent in this movie. He's doing a very bad accent. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it's like,
do you think the Sacha Baron Cohen nom is like the Academy being like, we should have done it for Borat, but we just couldn't quite.
Yeah, we couldn't justify it. We couldn't justify it because I go, he should be nominated for Borat.
He should be nominated for Borat. I totally agree. Totally agree.
I think I enjoyed this movie. Like again, I got to the end of this movie, I was like, that was an okay movie. Like, I do not think it's like, whoa,
I love
best
that.
Picture of the year.
Quiet and there will be silence. It's like, we're craning up, and Eddie Redmayne he's still monologuing,
acting his damn heart out, and like, you know.
And the thing is, it all works. But totally. when I saw that, I don't mean to compare the two, but they feel so cut from the same cloth.
Sure.
And I found myself like broken and like crying at the end, not because it was just like indulgent, but because I was like, oh my God, Small Axe.
Yeah.
Because I went, I understand what the significance of this moment is to this person,
or
versus
when
this
is
an important historical
limited
moment.
Series.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah. And this is sort of like when they get to the end, you're like, wow, an important historical moment has been reached, and justice is potentially yes.
Did things change? I don't know. Did it ever did it? Yeah, it's
exactly.
Yeah. So that was my whole takeaway from this movie, where I'm like, this seems like a movie that you're like, yep, makes sense that it's on this list, but that like people would say is the best picture nominee. Like, this is definitely a movie I like would recommend to parents. Like, I go, this is what a lot of people's parents might be like, oh, I saw this amazing movie, and you'd be like, yeah. Like, yeah, it's good. It's not like
a Green Book where I go,
no,
how, why?
Yeah, it's not.
But it's also
But it definitely feels like it fills a certain place in this list. But I do think it's maybe one of the least interesting movies out of this list.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's really accurate. Yeah. Well, that's the best picture noms. That's everything.
Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting year for movies, and I think we're going to look back on it with such a bizarre like whirlwind of what did this year mean. And
this year. Yeah.
I really hope that the best picture winner, whether it's Minari, I hope it's Minari or Nomadland or Sound of Metal. But my biggest hope is that we'll look back and go, that's what we took away from this year. Like, not Oscar bait, but like what we were experiencing collectively. And that being said, Palm Springs should have been nominated. That's my
100%. And Borat. I think Borat.
I think Borat. The last two slots, Palm Springs and Borat, no question.
Yeah, I think Borat also, like, man, that was like one of the hardest we've laughed all year at, like, a movie.
Is there a film that more encapsulates what 2020 was, between the election, COVID happening in the middle of it? No. I mean, I'm like, there's no I will go back to that movie and be like, that's 2020, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect example of like, You guys got to get your head out of your asses. You got to get your head out of your asses. You gotta just nominate this movie. We all know it. It's like, because they nominated Maria Baklava. So you're like,
but like,
deservingly so. So you're like, nominate the movie and nominate Sacha Baron Cohen instead. It's like, we know that was the right thing to do, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
What a weird year.
What a weird year.
Yeah.
And Soderbergh's directing. I don't know what to even expect for the Oscars. He's directing the Oscars. And he said it's going to be like a movie, like watching the Oscars is going to be like watching a movie. So I'm so curious to find out, like, what does that mean? What a weird year. And the Oscars are happening 2 months late. So we'll have to just see what happens on Sunday. And I don't think we'll ever forget it. I think that's that's the big takeaway. We won't forget this year. Oh, did we lose you? No. I think we froze. Can you hear me? Well, I think we lost Joey. So unless he comes back, we lost Joey. That's okay. We were finalizing our thoughts anyways. So thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. Thank you guys for watching this live stream. And we'll have to check back in after the Oscars on Sunday and see how they go. So I super appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed to Story Matters already, check out Story Matters podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We've been on break for about a year, but we will be back shortly in the next few months, I hope. So there's a whole back catalog of episodes. And if you want to listen to previous episodes with Joey and I talking Oscars for the last 5 years, you can check them out there. So on that note, we're going to call it a day. Thank you all for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk. Oh, Joey's back. Hey. Almost. Let's see if he's coming back on. It's okay if he's not, because I think he needs to go. It went so well until the very end. I think he's signing back on. And I know I was reading the chat. I know some people were saying like, oh no, I haven't seen any movies this year. That's okay, because guess what? It was a weird year. So hopefully this inspired some of you guys to go check out some maybe films that you would have otherwise missed, some lesser known, lesser widely released films. And yeah, I hope you are inspired to look at them with a different light and maybe take away something from them that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. Yeah, it's not a live stream without technical difficulties. Hold on, I'm texting him right now. I'm just seeing if he's going to pop on and say goodbye. We'll see. Isn't this fun? By the way, guys, what do you think of my live streaming setup? So I am trying to up the quality of my live stream. So I'm actually live streaming through my cinema camera, which I think looks pretty great. I'd love to do more live streams throughout the week. I'd love to do more like commentary and Q&As and hangouts and stuff. So hopefully the live stream setup looks pretty dope for today. Yeah, no worries. So Joey's going to sign off because he's got some stuff to go tend to. So thank you to Joey. So I'm going to do a little outro for the podcast. A huge thank you to Joey Richter for joining me. Try that again. A huge thank you to Joey Richter for joining me for today's special Oscars episode. Joey's internet dropped out right at the end, so we lost him, but I so appreciate his insight, his feedback, and the tradition continues. I'm so glad 5 years in a row we got to talk the Oscars, and I'm excited to see what next year brings. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast, and we'll talk to you very soon. Okay, that was the end of the recording. I'll answer some quick questions while I'm on here. Yeah, so let's see here. Quick questions. Looking and sounding excellent. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I saw somebody asked some question about going to college. Boy, that's a great question. You know, I am an acting coach and a teacher, and I get this question a lot. Let's see. The best advice I have, if you're not going to go to college, I went to college for 3 semesters, and then I ended up moving to Los Angeles. Best advice would be is continue to educate yourself. Continue to like read books, study, read scripts, watch movies. Like the more you find yourself engage in table reads, like get your friends together and read through plays, read through scripts. The more you're doing it, it's a muscle, right? You can't lift a 500-pound weight just if you've never picked up a 5-pound weight. So I encourage you to start just every day training, growing. I think the problem with being an artist sometimes is it's like, oh, it's an art. I feel it. But it's also a discipline. I think approach your craft the way an athlete approaches their sport. You have to train and do it intensely, and you can do it without going to college, which is great. But don't neglect it. It's not going to just happen if you sit around and hope that one day someone discovers your talent. You got to work your talent. You got to train it. You got to hone it. You got to hone your craft. And then I would say do as many things as you can. Do community theater. Do audition for short films at your local college for their film program. Like get yourself in and around theaters and on sets as much as you possibly can. Experience is everything. What you learn doing one thing on stage or on camera is like doing 100 classes. So you can do a lot without going to college. Let's see. Oh my gosh, thank you, Lucy. Any advice for actors who are going to move to LA to pursue acting? Yes. Have at least 6 months of savings, emergency fund, and get a job that allows you to pay the bills. I know that doesn't sound very sexy and it's not acting related, but truthfully, that is going to give you the freedom and the peace of mind to be able to pursue your craft and not feel overwhelmed and stressed and anxious because you cannot survive. So prioritize your survival, 6 months of savings, make sure you have a job that's going to be able to cover your basic expenses and indulge in things like acting classes and things like that. And then do as much as you can. Audition for plays, short films, like just say yes to everything initially. Not everything. Not everything. I mean, caveat. You need to have certain boundaries, but within reason. Don't turn down the opportunity to be like in a friend's table read or a short film because it's not like, oh, well, it's not Steven Spielberg, so why would I do it? I think the more experience you have, the better. Find scenes for your auditions. Well, when you audition for something in LA, they will send you the scenes. You will not need to find scenes for yourself, which is great. Do you think after COVID, you and the team will travel all around the world? Who's the team? I would love to travel around the world. I don't know who the team is, but I hope so. I am very much looking forward to traveling. Well, we're getting the behind the scenes podcasting experience. Yeah. My cat's good. She's going crazy. She's a maniac. Love the setup. Do you have a favorite quote ideology about acting? Yes. Love the journey, love the craft more than the prospect of success. You have to love doing it more than the idea of being successful at it. I would wager a lot of people who dip their toes into the water of being an actor or try to become a performer are really enamored by the idea of being successful and rich and famous and whatever from it. And that only happens for a very, very tiny percent of people who do it. So you have to really love it, and you have to be okay with the fact that you'll never make it, and whatever that means. If you love it and you can find a way to make it part of your life, it's a great life. But if you'll only be happy because you're making millions of dollars and you're really famous, most people will never achieve that. And so that's a really bad reason to get into it. Tips on headshots. It's all about the eyes, all about the eyes. No blurry background. I mean, it's no like busy backgrounds. You want them to go right to this. And I want you to think about the character that you're portraying in that headshot. You know, you're not just you being like, hey, I'm looking pleasant. You know, what kind of attitude, what kind of intention are you giving off? Is this character, is this version of you the strong, you know, resolved character? Are they more fun and lighthearted? Like, think about what you're saying with that photo. Kim did make it back from her trip. She sure did. Cool. Hey, what's up, Matt? Good to see you, man. How's the feature coming along? It's coming along great. Our first screening for our executive, all of our producer tier is on Sunday, May 2nd. So the film is essentially finished. There's a few color and music things left, but the film is all cut together. So we are screening it for backers on May 2nd, and then we're probably going to do another screening a little bit later in the month for more people. So if you're a backer of it, check it out. Aliens and Halloween is also done. Still going through some tweaks and such in regards to festival submissions. It might be cut down a little bit, but all the backers have seen the film. It's really, really funny. I think they did a great job. So yeah, all good news on there. I have a few small tweaks that I'm adding to Nameless. We have one more little pickup that we're shooting next week. The film that my buddy Eric and I have been working on to stitch together a scene, but the film is done. It's just a matter of mixing and mastering it. So, awesome, guys. Thank you so much for that, Miss Poulard. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, I have to head off for coaching. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching this. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I love to do more live streams. Love to have more guests on to talk about movies and stories and filmmaking and life and all kinds of deep, meaningful conversations. I'm glad that you're here with me.